Hello, hello. Welcome to the Feeling Lighter podcast. I'm Katie with the wonderful co-host Lisa here today.
Hello, everyone.
I think we're both really excited about our guest. Before we introduce her, I'll always remind everybody about our intention for this podcast, which is we really believe in beliefs around here.
Yes.
And our intention is to shed old beliefs that no longer serve us, one episode at a time, because the bottom line is how you feel about yourself changes everything in your life. Yes. So we really believe in beliefs, and I think some of our beliefs today are going to shift.
Absolutely.
So do you want to introduce our guest, Lisa?
I cannot wait. Dr. Amanda Hanson, also known as the Midlife Muse, is a doctor of psychology, speaker, and author, renowned for her transformative work in redefining the paradigm of womanhood. In over 25 years of her career, she has reached millions of women across the globe. Dr. Amanda sees female psychology and physiology as a harmonious system where the wellness of one cannot be considered without the other. She believes that due to the various physical and emotional disruptors in modern society, that harmonious system easily gets out of balance. But society doesn't encourage women to look at the cause, offering us another Band-Aid solution instead. I can't wait to talk all about that. Welcome to the show. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited.
Yay.
Well, I told Lisa the first question I'm going to ask today is, I'd like to be you when I grow up, and I'd like to know how to do that. I was stumbling across your social media, and I was like, oh dear, we got to see if we can get her on the podcast, because what a shining example of what true liberation and freedom can look like. So, if you don't follow her on social, please go follow her, Dr. Amanda Hanson, because the Midlife Muse, because you just radiate. And this is what we're trying to tell people when we're detaching from toxic diet and exercise culture, is that what we're really chasing is a feeling, is an energy about ourselves, and we think that diet and exercise will get us that feeling, and that's actually not true.
Right.
So all of your content really speaks to that, but I'd love to know the evolution of how you got to where you are today doing this very specific work that you're doing, if we want to start there.
Yes, absolutely. I think because my belief is that chasing hair color and toxins for the body, whether it's toxic creams, anti-aging creams that promise to reverse the years, or injections of any sort, I believe that is not the way to radiance. I believe that is actually an abandoning of our natural selves. And so I stumbled into this line and this version of sharing my message with the world, probably for me personally, 15 years ago, when I was still in private practice, but doing it one-to-one, and then with small groups of 10 or 20 women at a time in my studio. And then during the pandemic, started seeing my clients online, and they were saying things like, my sister in Dubai really needs some kind of support. You know, my cousin in, Marrakesh needs to be a part of this. And it just grew very organically and naturally, because I was having conversations with women that were not through the lens of my traditional training in clinical psychology. Because even getting my doctorate in clinical psychology, I now understand, looking back 25 years, was a patriarchalized system in and of itself. It was a bunch of white men writing the theology and the philosophies around human development, human psychology and behavior and neuroses, not taking into consideration the very different examples of a life lived through the lens of being a woman. And so as I started deconstructing that for my own self, I realized how bleak the traditional therapy path often can be for women in particular, that does not consider any kind of somatic practices, does not consider any honoring of natural states of our cycles in our life as women. So that's why I decided to go to the larger platforms and start sharing.
You said so much. This idea of the patriarchy and how it influences every single aspect of our lives, how our education, our body and beauty standards, things that have nothing to do with men in some cases.
In a lot of cases.
Has been totally influenced by the system under which we live. And the funny thing is, I Katie and I, we get together and we do these podcasts every quarter, and we get the list and we go through. And I had just randomly, like 2 weeks before I found out you were one of our guests, I had just stumbled upon a video on your Instagram, and I mean, first of all, you're gorgeous, and you just struck me, right? And you can see the radiance from you, and I felt it in your video. You were talking about how the patriarchy benefits from us, like, not being confident and not loving ourselves. And I was just so impacted by that, because I 100% agree. And I would love if you could just kind of explain that to our listeners, like how we play into these systems unknowingly, and how when we divest from them, how that shifts our entire narrative and really changes our entire lives.
Absolutely. You know, people are very easy to control when you have them constantly running for their lives in fear. And so a story built upon being the most beautiful, being the most attractive, being the most worthy woman for the standard of your success as a woman is, who are you, for all intents and purposes, what man are you standing next to, and how many children have you birthed? And just as we heard in the Kansas City commencement speech the other day,
Yikes.
right? We have not gone as far as we would like to think we've gone. And also in this country, regardless of where you stand on even abortion and your personal beliefs around it, I think that we can see by what's happening state by state, we're actually going further away. And my 21-year-old daughter has less rights now than I had when I was her age. And so we have to look at and understand why this continues to happen. And I think it continues to happen more so even now than when I was 21. My daughter and I have a podcast as well that we just got done recording a couple of episodes before I came on here. And we were talking about the fact that there is so much more distraction for her as a 21-year-old than there was for me as distraction. So she's not even having a typical 21-year-old experience, just like the 10 and 12-year-olds who have Get Ready With Me reels and stuff now on TikTok aren't having a 10 and 12-year-old experience. The more we can get women in fear and so fixated on how they look as the most important and interesting thing about them, guess what? All their financial resources don't go into building businesses. All of their time and energy is spent staring in front of the mirror, instead staring out at the world and the problems that we could be solving. And it is also then keeping her sicker. We can control people who are also sicker because she's putting all these levels of toxins into her body and getting absorbed into her bloodstream. So we keep women just like puppeteered around on these marionette ropes, and we wonder why nothing is changing for us. If anything, everything is going backwards for us as women. We give a couple women a seat at a board table and we think that we've somehow gone so far as women. We are in crisis as women. And you know what's terrifying is if I hold this opinion, everybody thinks that means I'm anti-women or I'm being judgmental. It's like, why can't we actually as women evolve to a point of having really hard conversations, different conversations with different opinions? Because if we have to give her a trigger warning around every corner, or we're worried about somebody's feelings getting hurt because we have a different opinion, we are never going to change the narrative. If we can't sit at the same tables and say really hard things or hear things that are opposite our opinion, nothing's going to change for us.
That's such a good point. Ooh.
And I think that I think a lot about what happens when people try to stand up for something different than what we've been conditioned to know. And then people in the positions of power, I don't even believe it's all conscious. Like, they're like, of course, when someone's in a position of power, when their power is threatened, they're going to try to fight back. And we fight back through all the ways you just said, right? We're going to keep people in this box and keep people small. And they don't see, like, men don't see how patriarchy hurts them too. And what I have said for a while, I've gone through my own journey of deconstructing the patriarchy. And I'm not going to lie that it started with, oh my God, like, I'm really mad. But it eventually evolved to, no, allyship is what needs to happen here. And I've even discussed that with my partner when I used to go to a bunch of business events with him, and people would ask me, I didn't know we were bringing the wives here. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure I have my own mind and my own intelligence, and sorry that threatens you. But it's kind of like, I was so sick of all those comments. And I finally told him, I said, listen, like, you have to understand that when we go to these things, and I share my opinion, not everyone, I don't want to make generalizations for men, but like if I say something that's against the norm, I'm going to be seen as radical left feminist. And if you say something that's against the norm, you're going to be viewed as a thought leader.
Right.
And like, it's like we're doing the same thing, but the perception and the system create such a different narrative. So like, I need your allyship, because if you come in and support, now the whole narrative can change. So I've had to even do my own journey, and like, it's not me against men or women against men. It's about, can you please join us in the allyship? But I think it starts with having these hard conversations and having an opening for men to say, I support this, rather than you're going to jeopardize my power and we're all going to lose.
Absolutely. Yes. And it would be, it's so beautiful when that happens, and the helping them understand through that lens, like you explained to your partner, right? Because often there is a blind zone there, and it takes you sharing from your perspective how this gets to look and feel different. And I would say really good divine masculine men want to be a part of a change, because actually any man who is standing next to a woman who is living this philosophy that I teach, it takes everybody higher. It naturally infuses everyone who comes into contact with her, and everybody gets to win from it. It is not a direct threat. If anything, it is I think, magnificence for the collective that she stands around as a matriarchal leader.
And how do you encourage women to get the confidence to share their voice? Because when you live in a culture, or when you're surrounded, like I was lucky because I came to my partner and said, these are the things I'm deconstructing, and it's okay if you're not on the same page. But for us to continue partnership will require that we get alignment here, because I'm not going to continue to live in a world this way, and I'm not going to continue raising two girls in a world that exists like this. And he was open enough to be there. But a lot of women don't have that privilege. And so it becomes very scary to say, speak up and use your voice and share how you feel and detach from all of these things, knowing that the person who is your partner may like put you down for that, or may say, no, I'm not available for that.
Yeah, and I think when I help my clients unpack that, I always ask them, like, what's more scary, hearing the truth and then deciding what you're going to make of that and do with that, or living a life in silence where you're not really seen, heard, or respected anyways? So which one feels more scary?
Well, damn. You put it like that. Okay. I need to work with you. I like this. I like this energy.
I mean, choose your heart, right?
Choose your heart. Yeah.
Do you want to live a lie? I mean, I don't know.
And for many, I think it is safer. That's the misery they know. They know how to walk in those really tight shoes because it's all they've ever known. And I understand. I understand for some, it's too risky.
Yeah. And that makes sense, because you're right. There are people, you have to meet people where they are, and some people aren't in that place in their journey where they can do that.
Okay.
And that's okay. That's absolutely okay.
But I will tell you, the women who come to me are ready. They're ready. Yeah.
I can imagine. they better be.
Yeah.
I love it. You talk a lot on your platforms about this idea of shameless self-love. Can you elaborate on what that is and what that looks like?
Yes, absolutely. You know, I was just telling a story recently of something that happened yesterday where I was witnessing my mother-in-law and my mother, who I love deeply and had spent a couple of days with them. And they were commiserating in the misery at 83 and 75 about their bodies.
Oh.
And I was sitting there listening at one point, and there were all of the partners of all three of us were at the other end of the table, just listening in. It's become so normalized to hear women speak like this. Yeah. And so I pushed my chair back. I just listened for a few moments, and I finally said to them, is this what I have to look forward to at 83, at 75 and 83? We're still doing this. We're going to continue to have these levels of self-berating conversations and almost one-upping each other, who can berate themselves even harder and more.
Yep.
And I said, what would happen instead of this? What would have happened if this conversation would have gone like this? And I gave some examples of that shameless self-love energy, of that like bragging energy, that expansion energy, that energy that makes you percolate and everyone in the room reach for more for their lives because they see what's possible. And they both looked at me, and it was like, oh God, I can't even think of speaking like that. I could never show up like that. I'm like, right. And that's why I do the work I'm doing, so that I can leave a different story for my daughter, because I know you both did the very best you could with what you have. Yeah. But being raised and around two women for over 25 years, my mom 51 years, who have spoke like this, do you know how much internal work I've had to do to escape the role modeling you've both given me? Mm-hmm. And you're still doing it? When should I decide to just talk negatively about myself all day long? How does that change anything? Is that good for my daughter at 21 years old to see that as the example? Should I start doing that now? And they both were quite speechless, to be honest. And that's why I'm a stand for shameless self-love, because you know what? When you have such profound rootedness in the way you love for yourself, you don't stay in bad relationships. You do ask for pay raises. You do make sure that you have an orgasm regularly. You do all the things. You show up in the world aging naturally with your head held high, because you realize you're not damaged goods. You're actually have so much more wisdom than you've ever had. So when you move with shameless, unshakable, deeply rooted self-love, you are unfuckable with in every aspect of your life.
Ooh, I feel like we need to like a clapping. Like, that was so good, but it's so true. And in the work that Katie and I both do, I know I'm a body image and movement coach for women and a physical therapist that I offer weight inclusive care. I work with a lot of people who exist in larger bodies, and society has told us you're supposed to be a certain weight, a certain size, a certain shape. And I really embrace this idea of body diversity, that we're all supposed to look different. Just like our shoe sizes are different, our waistlines will be different, our height will be different, where we carry weight will be different, and we don't have to be seeking this one, thin ideal to be considered beautiful or even healthy. And I call that conversation your mom and your mother-in-law were having, I call that body shame bonding. And and women of all ages do it. They sit around in clusters and they try to one up each other. Oh, my stomach. Oh no, your stomach's fine. Look at my thighs. Oh no. And it angers me. I have the exact same visceral response that you do. And I try to, taper it down to the people that I'm talking to, but I really want people to understand how bad it is, how much it impacts our own psyche and the people around us, how it gives other people permission to speak badly about themselves, how our daughters and our sons, our children are affected by this in the long run. So I commend you for speaking up, especially, I think you being in this generation and then having these elders in that generation, that wasn't probably popular to check people in their 70s and 80s about their communication and the words that they're using. But I think it's an act of courage that's important because of the tone that you're trying to set for your daughter and her daughters one day and the future of women altogether. So, I really appreciate that. And I want to, along those same lines, in this, how our culture kind of encourages these negative, self-disparaging conversations, I wanted to know what you thought about, or explain, I guess, this idea of toxic beauty standards and how they are negatively impacting us as women and really impacting our whole world and how we engage and show up every day. What exactly do you see as these toxic standards, and what has been your, I guess, journey away from those things, and how you help your clients let go of those things?
Yes, I think in the same way that you talk about body diversity, and we can all get behind that and celebrate that. It's fascinating when I talk about diversity of aging faces, and people think that it's somehow a judgment. You can see women are so paralyzed by it's the one territory women don't want to go to. Yeah. And it is, to me, it is a complete and total erasure of the aging face. And my daughter was sharing today on our podcast episode that she's like, Mom, honestly, I don't even know what a 30-year-old face looks like. I don't know what a 40-year-old face looks like. If I go back and look at your pictures, that's the only example I have, because nobody who is 30 or 40 that I have any association with or that is in proximity to me has their natural faces. So I don't know what my face would maybe look like more or less when 7 or 8 years from now. And that to me is terrifying. It's terrifying that we are saying now to look a certain way as a worthy or acceptable aging woman, you can't have lines or sunspots, and everything has to be the fact, even talk about the fact that Martha Stewart being 80 years old on the cover of a magazine was celebrated. It would have been celebrated, I thought, if she would have actually been 80 on a cover. But
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that is not, to me, that's not 80 on a cover.
That's not a typical 80-year-old person. Like, yeah.
It's like, where are we going to call these things into conversation and say, wait a minute, what are we actually doing? So now the expectation of all of us watching, where are our role models? Where are we looking for female leadership? Where are the matriarchs with the etched lines on their faces? And so I think we are erasing toxic beauty culture, I think is affecting an erasure of an entire population of women's faces. And then if you swing in the other direction, my daughter's one of the only ones in her entire group of friends who hasn't had her lips done and who doesn't get fillers. So all these girls in their 20s are getting their faces done. And then you go even further and you see 10 and 12-year-olds now have get ready with me's on their social media, and they are going to Sephora using retinol, having a 10-step skincare routine at 10 to 12 years old. It is affecting everybody. The billion-dollar companies that are profiting love it because now the consumer range has widened.
Right.
But we are not seeing diversity in faces. We are not seeing expressions when we are trying to connect with somebody emotionally because so many people's faces are literally frozen.
Oh, this is so good.
I want to know how it's so funny. So I've always been like an outspoken, like my parents would probably attest to like me being really outspoken as a child. Like from a very young age, I was the oldest of four with three younger brothers. I instantly saw like my chore list was very different than their chore list. Like expectations of me were very different. And I was calling my parents sexist like at 9 and 10 years old. Like I'm like an Enneagram 1, like life has to be fair. So I was like, whoa, this has to be my gender because there's three of them and one of me and something's not adding up. And I think so I've always had this innate, like I want to talk about this and bring light to the injustices around this, and then I get the courage to do it, and then I always go back and I go, oh, I was too loud, or I was too much, or I was too opinionated, and then I get like so wrapped up in the mental gymnastics of like, did people approve of, and it's like I would love some guidance on like how to turn that voice off, because in a lot of ways when those voices aren't there, I actually feel really great about my life. Like my partner and I have come a long way to share parental responsibilities. We've, had lots of communication, but like I know some people look at our marriage and go, I mean, not everybody, but some people are like, oh, well, he just does what Katie wants. I'm like, that's actually not what's happening. I don't know if you've met him, but he's a very powerful person. He doesn't just roll over and drool. He just respects me.
Oh, go figure.
And so then I go into like oh, well, maybe I shouldn't be doing it this way because no one else around me is. It's like no one else is holding up these standards, and like, am I just a bitch for holding up standards and requiring partnership? Like, what the fuck?
Fascinating that the knee-jerk reaction is maybe I'm a bitch. What if it's no, I'm a leader?
Yeah.
Right, the most revolutionary thought leaders of our time, everyone thought they were crazy in their time. It was not only until after they were dead that we realized, wow, they were ahead of their time.
Yeah.
And who does it really help when you stay small or silent about the way you live or the thoughts you have? It actually frees and liberates more people and can balance out more marriages and create more harmony for everybody if you keep sharing the example of what you've created built upon your own beliefs.
I have to share this funny story because my daughters, like, as they start, they're almost 7 and 11, and like this is where you really start to see who they are as people, and they're powerful little girls. And my kindergartner came home a couple weeks ago and she said, yeah, there's this boy who always is trying to, show off to me at school. And I said, okay, what do you have to say about that? And she said, that Shania Twain song, That Don't Impress Me Much? And I said, yes. And she goes, that don't impress me much. And I said, oh shit, you're gonna, okay, like I just want to keep fostering this. But it's like this weird place of like, I'm so proud and I hope the world doesn't eat you alive and call you a bitch.
Right.
You know,
They
because
probably will, but why is that wrong? Like, we have to question being called a bitch, being called I'm too opinionated often means I know I'm on the right track.
Right.
I am not here to be the most liked, the most like, if everybody likes me, I'm actually not really saying what I need to say. I'm not here to be liked and approved of. I'm here to help change the narrative for my daughter and all the women that will come after me. I'm here to do a really serious work. If we're here to be liked, I'll just go do a get ready with me tutorial. Put on 15 layers of contouring or whatever the hell these people are doing. If I want to be
it's hard
liked.
not to be liked, I think. I think especially as women, we're raised to like make people happy and be people pleasers. And so it's like this weird dichotomy of like breaking down the narrative and paving a new path and like being okay with it. You know, do you think that over time it gets a little bit easier?
Absolutely. I think that I've never been one who was seeking likes. For me, it's been a few legendary loves is all I was ever actually going for. And then everything else, I just needed to divide the middle so that I can get through and do the work I needed to do. So I'm not, like feels cheap to me. Ooh. I'm not here to be liked. I'm here to be profoundly known and loved by a handful of people.
Where are you at? Where are you located?
I'm in Fort Lauderdale.
Okay, I'm coming to Florida. No, that is so good though. But you're right. I think the systems under which we live, we operate under a patriarchy. And I've shared before on some of our episodes. As a child, I grew up in chaos, so I made a choice for like conservative religious living. It was safety to me, right? It was protection, it was rules, it was rigidity. But boy, it did a number on me. And it took me so many years. And I don't despise that time. I, established a faith that I think was important. It got me through very difficult times as a child growing up. But as an adult, once I got to like my 30s, I was like, ooh, this is like been holding me back and stifling me. I have been giving my power away. I have been treating myself like a second-class citizen simply because I have a vagina, and engaging and operating in the world from a place of like fear and wanting to be liked and wanting to be accepted and not wanting to step on people's toes or lead in ways like, we talk about in marriage and in partnership, this idea of like submission and that's a whole nother topic I know we can get into, but I know for certain, like I am a great leader in certain areas specifically, and it's doing my family a disservice if I don't take the lead in these areas. Yes. And just because you have a penis doesn't mean you're supposed to take the lead in all of these areas, because I'm simply better in some, just like you're better in some. And so I am still working through that process of like detangling my identity from these religious, constructs that told me as a woman I shouldn't do, or I should only do, or I should just have, or just be. And I don't know if you see that a lot with, clients that you work with, but I think that has been a big piece of my journey of coming into who I am as a woman now that I'm 42.
Yes. I think religion, patriarchy in general, but religion especially has run such amok and caused so many problems for women around their bodies and sensuality. I mean, I just finished writing my book, and part of one of the pieces of the Bible that I even reference that a third of the world reads there's a direct quote in there about women's bodies and blood and the shame of the blood, right? And when we've been running that storyline for so long, it is no wonder that we wonder if our opinions even matter. And I see my clients gaslight themselves around every corner about great ideas they have or something they want to share or say, because the whole world has been gaslighting them forever. And so it makes sense how we just do it to ourselves over and over again. And we spend half our lives not even sure what we like, what we desire. When I ask women in my masterminds or in my workshops, what is it that you desire for your life? They look at me as if I've asked the most difficult question in the world. They're like, desire? I can't even talk. Maybe a nap. Maybe an uninterrupted nap. Desire, there's no room for me to desire. That's a tragedy when we have created such a selfless existence for women and call it the most beautiful thing to reward her for, when she can't even grasp into who she is. I sure as hell don't want my daughter growing up no sense of self.
Yep. Yep. We talked about that on another episode. And I was saying, I wrote a blog that says why I never want my children to refer to me as selfless. Because
Never.
you're right. It's about not caring about yourself and putting everybody else before you. And that definitely was praised. I mean, my grandmother, that's what people loved about her. She's so selfless. Look at her just running herself into the ground to take care of everybody else. She's raising her daughter's children. You know, it's a lot. I don't want that. Like, no, thank you. I'm glad my grandma did it, right? Because I benefited. But I don't want that for myself, and I don't want that for my children.
Yes, yes. And I think that that is how women felt worthy, right? As they too bought into the storyline that I have to be in constant service to justify my existence, and I have to be in constant service to maybe get the feeling of love or approval.
Heavy on the maybe.
Usually I have a ton of questions, and I feel like I'm just kind of speechless in a lot of ways, because it's weird. I feel like I do have a very strong inner critic, and for whatever reason, my soul keeps going. It's like, yeah, the critic's there. So it's like I'm trudging down this path that you talk about. The inner critic is still there. Right. I keep going, and the evidence in my children shows me that they get it. You know, like we were watching this movie one time, and there was this husband who was just like, I mean, he was just the epitome of what the patriarch looks like. And they, without prompt, you know, oftentimes I like to talk about things we're watching. They were like, why is this woman married to this man? And I was like, oh, you're going to be fine.
They're going to be good.
You know, but it's a lot to unravel, to like not only deconstruct, turn down the inner critic, and then have the confidence and the, you know, like courage to also tread a new path at the same time. It sometimes feels really overwhelming to do both.
Yeah,
it really does. And going back to the TV or movie piece, it's, you know, again, another piece of reference that I can quote because I just put it in my book, but 90%, and you can Google this, 90% of directors, producers, screenwriters, and, you know, anything that has to do with movies, television, are men.
Are men. No, that's so true.
So imagine that. So this is why I wondered 15 years ago why I had such a resistance to TV and movies, didn't enjoy them, have pretty much stopped watching them, is because I now understand it's always the story I am interpreting or using as quote unquote entertainment is informed through the lens of a male's experience. And that's why I was hungering for more deeply nuanced characters. That's why it always felt so cheap and insulting to me. I thought, again, that, oh my gosh, Amanda, relax. Can a movie just be enjoyable? But it couldn't. Movies couldn't even be enjoyable to me anymore. And then when I found and understood this originally, and I've kept my eyes on the research, it used to be 74%, it's now 90%. I understood, and now I help educate all my clients. I'm like, that's why so much of what we use to relax or entertain ourselves with doesn't even feel good. Or you think you're crazy because everywhere reflected back to you on every ad, every campaign, all over social media, and now television, most of the songs, we are experiencing the world through the lens of men. Their interpretation of a woman in a relationship, or how a woman, her thing that she is running towards pretty much in every plot line is cheap love.
Yeah. Oh, cheap love. Yeah. I saw that sort of examined with like Disney, like all of the princess stories, all men, all of these things, giving your voice away so you can be with a man. It's so deeply rooted, and you're right. We're essentially we've been brainwashed because it's all we've seen our entire lives. I want to know, I mean, you shared so many good, you know, things already, but what is like the one thing you just want women to get? Like if you just had like a sound bite, like what do you want women to get and understand from working with you, from the research and the learning that you've done, and from your experiences? What is it that you want us to walk away with?
Yes, that the greatest truly of love of your life is waiting for you to look at her back in the mirror. Everything we've ever craved or desired in the most primal of relationships, all the way back to parents, to the lovers, to our children, to everyone. Everything, that approval you speak of, it is all there inside of you. You just have to be willing to meet yourself there every morning and hold that reverence and commune with yourself for a couple of minutes every single morning. And over time, you will start to feel her come alive. And then you move so differently in the world when you realize everything I've so desired from partnership, from the communities or the world, was already here inside of me. So I get to give myself that freedom and that permission to start moving with the things I desire, giving them to myself. And then I get to show up in the world. Like I fathered myself back through my healing. I mothered myself in all the ways that all the things that I desired that I didn't get, I gave to myself. I am my greatest lover. So when you source from those places, it doesn't mean we don't love relationships. It just means we don't become needy in them in a way that we won't negotiate for better for ourselves, because we ultimately know we are the source of everything we are already needing.
It's like a mic drop moment. Thank you. Yeah, that was good.
I think this is hopefully going to be a really powerful episode for everyone listening, because with the podcast and with WeShape, our entire intention is to bring people, especially women, from this container of self-betrayal to this evolution of self-liberation. And that is like where truth lies. That is where freedom really exists. I know we've all been tricked to think that it exists through how many men find us attractive, or how much weight we lose, or what diet we subscribe to, but you can't argue with the truth. And what I find you speak is the truth. Yeah. And you just can't argue with that. And so it's like we can keep on those paths. Like that's what I have to tell myself all the time. It's like, yeah, you can listen to the inner critic. You don't actually have to adhere to the behavior that the inner critic wants you to have, but it's not true.
Right. Katie, I'd go even as far as to challenge if that inner critic is actually yours. I think often what happens is we hear messaging long enough from the culture at large, from formative people in our lives at very, very impressionable times, that and then it gets restated over and over in different iterations throughout our decades as we grow. I often have realized that the things I thought or berated myself on, when I really started to tease it apart, I realized it wasn't even mine. It was something that I'd interpreted from a sick culture so deeply that I thought it was mine, but at the base, at the root of it, and almost none of it was true when I excavated for it. So you might find that it actually isn't even yours.
Probably.
Give it back.
Probably. You're probably right there, for sure. So, I just can't thank you enough for the work that you're doing, because, but actually I want to ask one more thing, because I think this is important, because I think what comes up a lot when people talk about this very particular thing is that there is this defensive, right? I said when people are in position of power or in a culture that they benefit from, it's like, I think people fail to see how deconstructing these systems will actually benefit them. They instantly see it as threat. So where do you see men fitting into this narrative, and how does that work? How do we create that allyship so that it's not men against women?
Yeah, I've raised 3 incredibly divine masculine men. I've been married for 28 years to a man who is so willing to constantly go back to the drawing board and reassess. And what I've always said is that just like any good company, there has to be a constant reevaluation of what's working, what's not, where can we tweak things, where can they get better. So not buying into this idea that none of this is meant to be a threat to anybody as much as it's meant to be an expansion for all. So when we can sit down and say, I want to build a bridge to you and you back to me in a way that makes us a power couple like no one has ever even seen. Let's build that bridge together. And here's the parts that I know I can build and bring, and I want to hear from you about yours and the ways that we can be the counsel for one another, because I want to be the paradigm shifters for our lineage. I want our children to look and say, that is the example of divine leadership. You know, the whether you are standing next to a woman or a man or vice, however you decide to couple with someone, just watching it be my power, my opinions, my femininity, and my matriarchal leadership is not in direct competition with my husband.
Yeah.
It is a completely different energy. Like he brings things that, like my tattoo says Ubuntu. It's an African Zulu term that means I am because you are. That we all bring such beautiful, exquisite gifts. And there are so many beautiful ways we can merge together and what my husband and I have created is this unbelievably epic life, because we both seek each other's counsel. We both deeply admire and respect what each brings to the table, and we are constantly in these kinds of conversations. We don't even know what it's like to have a typical we don't even talk about like what's for dinner as much as we talk about how are we rebuilding a better world. Like constantly having these conversations, because my leadership through this lens allows him to be a better CEO at the company he's at, to change the structures internally of a system that was not functioning as diversely as it should have been. So not for to help men understand that none of this is a threat to you. They've also been brainwashed in a system that says a strong woman is somehow trying to emasculate them. A strong woman, actually, the man is even more in his divine masculine.
Yeah.
I think that I just wanted to bring light to that, because a lot of what we see on social media, like, you know, is a little bit like it's like the way that people are trying to go about like bringing awareness to the patriarchy. Sometimes it is a little bit like fuck men.
Yeah.
And like while some of the memes and stuff are kind of funny,
Hilarious.
I also am like, ooh, I don't know. I mean, just being in my own relationship and going from, okay, I'll play this role. Okay, I don't like this role. So then I'm going to go in competition, and then it's going to be a fight. And then it's like, oh no, actually it just needs to be a redistribution of power and communication. Like I've gone through that whole cycle. Yeah. I've known that the competition and the butting of men versus women or me versus you doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't.
And so I think it's just important to highlight that, because I think that women are ready for this movement, but I think we have to be mindful about how we execute it. Like, don't make the mistakes that I did, like, because my marriage almost didn't survive that. Yeah. Because I was like, I'm ready to go to battle with you. I will fight to the end. I've seen the truth. Rather, if I had a redo, I mean, we're all learning, but if I had a redo, I would have been like, wait a minute, you know, I probably would have had more vulnerability. I was just afraid that was just going to be squashed, right?
Absolutely.
So, but I think that we have to be mindful about how we go about such a powerful movement, because it isn't about men versus women. It's about allyship. It's about redistributing the powers that actually make us all stay small, whether we know it or not.
Yes. And to the point, I'm raising a son too.
Yeah.
Like I'm raising two beautiful daughters, but I have a beautiful son, and I want him to be powerful and strong and healthy and able to have happy and healthy relationships and to show up in the world as his best self. So yeah, this idea that like we're just saying, oh, men suck, you know, like y'all stay in the corner and let us take over. No, it is about this working together and understanding each other's strengths and weaknesses and showing up, you know, for each other and for ourselves. So I think that is a really good point.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. We have to ask you the big question around here before we let you go, which is, what is a belief that you once had that you no longer have that has impacted your life in a meaningful way?
Yes, I would say that my belief that I once had was, if I shine too bright, no one will be there any longer. My loved ones will not be there. And that's not true, because I really believe that we keep ourselves so small and we tell ourselves so many lies and stories as to why we can't shine as bright as our soul is calling us to shine, because we fear if we get too bright that people may tell a story of, who does she think she is? And no, thank you, I'm out. when in fact my brightness actually just helps illuminate the whole room for everybody else to shine theirs as well. So I stayed small for entirely too long because I worried that if I really showed what was inside, it would make people scatter. And some did, and the right ones did. And the right ones did.
Got your people.
Yeah.
That's so wonderful. And where can people find you?
The best place is on Instagram. Midlife Muse is my handle, and same for TikTok. And my website is amandahanson.com.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's been such an incredible conversation. And thank you to all of our listeners. We hope you enjoyed this as much as Lisa and I did. And we will see everyone next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.